Hello, it's Peter Wright and Kathleen Beauvais with another episode of the Yakking Show, the Harmony Channel. And this is your path to wholeness. And we help you along that path to wholeness by bringing you expert guests who help you lead a better, healthier, and happier life. And that is very important going into the interesting times we are heading into by the look of things. But first, let's introduce our co-host, Kathleen Beauvais. Hi, Kathleen. How are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing great, Peter. Thank you. And thank you also very much for tuning into our show. We so appreciate having you. And as Peter mentioned, we do have another special guest with us today, and we are so thrilled to welcome Rachel Fleischman to the show. Hello, Rachel. How are you today?
Hello, Kathleen. Hello, Peter. I am great. I'm grinning from ear to ear. I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you.
It's our pleasure. Now, Rachel is a psychotherapist. She's a workshop facilitator, a wellness expert, an educator, and mental health advocate. She helps clients unlock issues which are held inside the body by using her proprietary work merging talk therapy with expressive arts. So let's just delve right in, right off the bat. Rachel, can you tell us exactly what you do and how you do it?
Absolutely. And I've been doing it for 24 years and I haven't gotten great at saying it. You'd think I'd have that down, but I think each time I say it, it's slightly different depending on how it's so organic. Mm-hmm. I do seated psychotherapy or talk therapy, as we call it, always for many years now, always with an eye towards how are my clients living in their bodies, number one. But the talk therapy, you guys might be surprised, is actually done seated. Here and there, we do some getting up. Here and there, we do some breath work. And here and there, we do what might be called somatic work, closing the eyes. But more than anything, I have to be a detective, a Sherlock Holmes, to see how is my client living in their body. Is there a foot shaking? Is there a foot tapping? Mm-hmm. Is there a fidgetiness? Is there a falling asleepness? We sometimes call that dissociating. I am the expert there in helping them engage and live a more embodied life. When I am out of the psychotherapy room, and clients can join this as well, I'm leading these classes and workshops and retreats, which are called Dance Your Bliss and definitely live in the world of more of an active or living psychotherapy, where we join improvisational dance and movement, guided improvisational dance and movement, stretching, meditation, and then the expressive arts, poetry, making music with our mouths, which is a lot of fun. Art making, which I love, especially with the non-dominant hand, so no inner critic comes in. When you have both or one, I just wish everyone just had a psychotherapist, but if you can't afford that, you can come to a workshop. If you have one or the other, my goal is that we can all be living more embodied lives, living in our bodies, feeling our health. It helps us heal quicker from injury, helps us be smarter, helps business people be much more wonderful public speakers, and Lord knows we can all use that. Mm-hmm. And I think it helps us love ourselves a lot more.
Fascinating.
Interesting. So I'm going to go down a little rabbit hole before I ask you what I intended asking you, because you used the expression non-dominant hand, right? Yeah. So I'm getting on in years, as you can see, and as the audience can hear. So a couple of years ago, I was worried about cognitive decline through aging, right? And I read that if one uses one's non-dominant hand for certain tasks, it can delay onset of dementia, etc. So I started writing every morning 4 or 5 lines with my left hand. I'm right-handed. And I've now got to the stage where if my wife comes in while I'm writing, she says, "Oh, your writing with your left hand is much more legible than your writing with your right hand." Really honestly funny. It's not as neat. It's not, the letters are not always as well formed, but it's more easily readable, more legible than my right hand. So I sorry, that's a long background, but tell us more about this non-dominant hand while we're on that subject.
Sure. One thing that's really cool is I'm a lefty. I have a southpaw. What else have we called them? And I have always been obsessed with how that makes me feel a little bit special. Mm-hmm. It's hardly special anymore, but as a child, we still had elder neighbors lovingly tapping my hand and asking me to use the other hand, right?
Oh, yes.
So, which even in a lot of languages, the word left is words that are very negative are used for the word
sinister, right?
Sinistre, sinister, yeah. Links, I forget what that means in German. But anyway, when we write with our non-dominant hand, science knows that we are less involved in the prefrontal cortex. And yet you know some things I don't know, Peter, because when you're writing with your non-dominant, which is your left, it's actually rewiring some patterning in your brain. I think it's really fun that your wife says to you that handwriting has actually gotten better than your dominant, which I find fabulous. There are some experts, names I'm forgetting, and I can share with you for show notes, who have shown that creativity can deepen tremendously when we do writing with our non-dominant. I use it for drawing and expressing through what I call hand dancing, or dancing with a hand, which I find just takes us out of our inner critic instantly. I also believe that everything I do can help with cognitive decline and dementia. I'd love to say everything I do helps with that. Some of that, unfortunately, some of it is predetermined. Of course, a lot is not. But with that said, when we go outside of the box and write with our non-dominant, we are stretching ourselves in so many ways. And I also believe in the drawing that we do coming out of the inner critic, which I find to be so empowering. And then I see images coming up that I find just delightful and surprising.
Interesting. Wow. So again, you mentioned not left-handers no longer being special. Still a fairly small minority of what, 10 to 15% of the population?
I'd love to know, and I could easily Google. I'm going to guess 10 to 15. And when I was a child, I would have said it was more 5. I felt like in each class, if we were a class of 30 and you said, who are your lefties? We'd have 2 kids raise their hand. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I have 2 sons, one of whom the older one is left-handed, and I also read that if you look at IQ of left-handed people compared to right-handed, your average is higher amongst left-handed people, and your creativity is higher amongst left-handed people. I've read that.
I just love everything you're saying.
I'm not. No, I'm not just trying to make you feel good. I've read that, but and the one was supposedly based on trial. Anyway, I'm going down a rabbit hole that is interesting, but there's a lot more interesting stuff we need to ask you about. One that really I've got to ask you, being a male, is what led you to combine your 2 passions? No, sorry. I've gone off track yet again. Explain how you connect dance and getting over fear and anger. How does that work?
Oh, I love that question. And first, I will say, getting over, good luck. I still am a human who experiences fear and anger on the regular. With that said, when we move our bodies, we're enjoying ourselves. Let me add that. When we move our bodies and we're enjoying ourselves, we lose some of that inner policeman. We lose some of that inner judgment, some of that prefrontal cortex, and we just come into the now. So we're already in the present, which is delightful, because often fear and anger, often, not always, is regret of the past, or worry about the past and worry about the future, or grievances we have about the past and worry we have about the future. When we move our bodies, we are in the now. You've both moved your bodies, I'm sure. Yoga, dance, cricket. I don't know the countries you're from. I'm making it total.
Yeah, absolutely. Cricket.
Okay,
Yeah,
great. My husband is a player, so I always have to give shout out to cricket. When we move our bodies and we're in our present, nothing else exists, right? Kathleen, you know, I can tell by your gracefulness, you move your body. When we move, we are in our present, which is phenomenal. And if we do it enough, we form a ritual. And as a wonderful choreographer, Twyla Tharp says, how does she put it? Ritual is habit made holy, which I just love that. So it's a habit to put on your cricket helmet and your knee pads. And it's a habit, Kathleen, if you and I get out the tennis rackets, or if we put out our yoga mat, or if we go boogie and dance. But we also have ritual involved in it. All of that surpasses the place where we go around anger and fear. Our breath changes. Hopefully, right? We're breathing from a deeper place. Diaphragmatic breathing is happening, which is always a win. And we are working through emotions. For me, with dance, I would also say probably with Qigong and Tai Chi, there's so much activity happening that balances me energetically. And I see it in my students, that I start a dance fretting about a conversation I've had with a friend weeks ago, or how I'm sure my best years are behind me. You name it, whatever the thoughts are. And I finish the dance journaling about something really exciting I've discovered, or how I really want to start crafting again, or how I know I want to go volunteer, or how I don't want to. So there's a clarity that comes in that surpasses and bypasses anger and fear. There's the deep breathing. And God darn it, there's joy, which always takes us there every time. Yeah.
So the act of dance just takes your attention then away from what is troubling you, so what's worrying you or what's angering you. So that is the premise, is that by just moving your body takes your focus away, takes your mind off of.
Yes.
But it's deeper than that too.
It's less sticky, but my gosh, I never want people to think that I'm just tossing it under the rug or cha-chaing it away. In a sense, we still get to move it. You do feel it, you do have to feel it to kind of move out of it. But the feeling changes. Often the anger changes. Often I'll see in a dance where someone came in and warned me that they're in a terrible mood, or I just know they're in, and I'll see tears, you guys. I'll see tears prickling at the eyes or down the cheeks. The anger has moved. The anxiety has moved. So there's a movement happening and there's a release happening. And I also think, like I said, it's less sticky. So it's still there, kind of, right, burbling about, but it isn't taking over now. It's in the back seat.
Does this also work for grieving people?
This is such a wonderful question. In the last podcast, I had this wonderful question from the podcaster about that. And I gave the long-winded answer, and I want to do better today and give short-winded, which is yes and yes, but. The but is, where are we in the grief? With really fresh grief, friends, maybe see a doctor, maybe talk with your minister, maybe sometimes have medicine at the ready. With really fresh grief, right? It's a lot. Sometimes just keeping busy is what the person needs to do. So depending on where we are in the grief, and I've experienced this because I always say I danced the dance of my father's death again and again and again. And I also danced the birth of my friend's children with joy and so on. So yes, it can work for grief. I always just say it's yes and, or yes, but. Make sure you're getting the other support you need. I take grief so seriously, of course. But Kathleen, it does help. And it helps a great deal. Yeah.
Right. So what led you, Rachel, to combine your two passions, the study of movement and psychotherapy?
I think I would say trauma and cynicism. My own pain and my own history with pretty severe bullying as a child and feeling othered and some other things. In addition, the cynicism, which I get a kick out of, was my anger that the therapy session seemed so neck up. It seemed so from the neck up. It seemed, I almost want to put my hands on my hips. It seemed almost from and I got great training, but it seemed from the training and from everything I was reading at the time, and then I started reading other things, it was really rigid. The sort of old school masculine form of psychotherapy. No disrespect, Peter, to your sex.
None taken.
Thank you. And so I, of course, in going through my own struggles in my teens and early 20s, went, this ain't cutting it. I'm getting something I want from the session. And it wasn't until a psychotherapist in my 20s, I'd already been a fitness instructor. I'd already done a lot of things around sort of shaping myself with movement. But it was when she brought movement and guided imagery into the therapy session that I went, aha, there it is on the nose. This is divine. I'd also on the side always studied yoga and dance. And as a younger person, I helped my father, my late father, with a physical therapy that he was kind of developing in his own cool way in his basement. And I was like, why is it every time I do this, I feel better? Every time I do this, if every darn time I do this, I feel better, I can't be alone. That can't just be me. It can't just be anecdotal. So I dove in Philadelphia to so many different movement systems that I could find in different dance worlds, group motion, lots of names I don't have to throw out, but different programs and trainings that I got in dance therapy, continued with learning psychotherapy, and thought, these have to be best friends. They have to be merged. And indeed, they work beautifully together.
Wow. Amazing, eh? Amazing. So I was looking at your website, your Bliss workshops. So I can understand women getting engaged in that, but being an older, conservative, stiff upper lip, British-born male, do you find men as receptive to it as your women clients, or not necessarily?
I just had this vision, Kathleen, and listeners, of Peter and I dancing with our hands. And I just had this vision of him grooving with me, little groove, but just doing like a little elbow, shoulder. I'm like just moving my elbow and shoulder for the
Come on,
listeners who
Peter.
can't see us. And I was like, the dude can dance like anybody's business. So Peter, the answer is, you're absolutely right. I would say about 80% of my students are female, and the 20% of men who come in leave renewed. I am so thrilled when men come to my class. So yes, there's about 2 for every 15 women. And they are certainly not as receptive to women. The name and the colors on my website, I think everything is almost a bit hyper feminine, because I am quite a maternal gal. With that said, I've had engineers and stiff upper lips and CEOs and the whole like, and introverts and Vietnam vets who open up and are in their experience and have a blast. So truly, I do see more females, but when I see a guy, I always feel like, you are welcome here. And please do your thing. I won't get up on your grill. Do your thing, but thank you. And yes, you bet. What a joy we'll have. Yeah.
You know, I would assume
Sounds good.
I would assume that there's a lot of people that might be inhibited or feel like feel stupid or feel like embarrassed about engaging in that kind of movement. I don't know.
Yes, Kathleen, I would be that if I wasn't me, which is hard to imagine, but if I wasn't me, and I'm getting better at that as a therapist, I would be terrified. Right? If there's anything I'm not into, if you put me in a math convention, I'm going to want to run out the other way or something like that, or a thrilling sport. First thing I do is create a safe space. My silliness, my humor, the fact that I'm not a professional dancer, so my movements can be silly and playful, really helps the space. The fact that I speak while we're dancing and I say, dance from your elbows. And listener, I'm just kind of moving my elbows. And then I say, invite your wrists in. I'm giving movements that disinhibit us, invite in some playfulness. There's always space to, if we're on Zoom, you can turn away or whatever, you turn your camera off, but there's always space to have your own privateness. This is yours. But absolutely. I mean, I think there's so much that does frighten us about anything deeply expressive, and names like Dance Your Bliss, it almost connotes something which would make one cynical, like, really, like, what's going to get me there? So safety, the teacher always mirroring truth. And as I say, I'll be the silliest one in the room, starting small, small movements like you might in a soft yoga class, and bringing on music that you've heard of and love. You're going to hear your Motown, you're going to hear rock and roll, you might hear classical, you're going to hear some R&B, you'll hear some not spoken word, singer-songwriter. You're going to, again, hear a lot from 60s and 70s. How can we not, when I put Motown on, how can we not want to move a little? So once you're in there and you go, oh my word, it was nowhere near what I thought it would be like, that's the hook. That's the joy. Great question.
So I'd love.
So hang on, Kathleen, I've got to jump in. It'll be quick. I promise you. It's going to be really quick. Observation. I go to a church that now has we hit 1,000 people the other Sunday, and we have to have two services to accommodate everyone, and that's all over 3 years. That's not the point. The point I'm trying to make is when the gospel songs come on, it's a mixture of traditional hymns and Christian music. When I always sit near the back because I'm often an usher or whatever, I look forward and I would say more than half of the women are swaying to the music or moving to music. Maybe 10% of the men are. That's it.
Thank you.
Is that about?
Well, I wish you had said something higher than 10, but that's okay. I mean, it is church. It's such a reverent environment. Sure. I went to university undergrad across the street from a Baptist church, about 100% African-American Baptist church. Of course, I was invited in, and you know where this is going. You know what I'm about to say. The dancing and the movement just made sense. At synagogue, being very reform in my Judaism, there is movement and dance and song and clapping. And for the older folks, sometimes even softer. To come back to what you said, I'm so glad you brought up church and music, right? At church, I'm hoping there is music. It's spiritual worship. When I think of dance, we know that throughout the centuries and throughout millennia, movement and spirituality really have gone together. It is a celebration of life. It shows the ritual of the life cycle. Little babies do not know how not to sort of move a little bit and groove. The fact that we have 10% grooving and moving is beautiful. I'll take it. And I hope that as impassionedness happens, maybe they'll see that usher in the back, Mr. Wright, who they've always been curious about, Mr. Peter Wright with a great accent. And maybe they'll see just a little, and for the listener, I'm just doing like a little sway or a little something, and they'll go, I too can do that. It's collective joy. If we go to a rock concert, my friends, and we do the wave or something,
Yes,
or we see
right.
everyone clapping, we're going to be there together in the clapping and in the movement. So part of it is the collective joy or collective spirit you're seeing at church too, which is really powerful.
Yeah, I nearly did sway to the music, and I just caught myself in time. What I will tell you, though, is that the comment I made about only 10% men, if I look at young boys under about 12, because we have kids throughout service, there's almost as many of them swaying to the music as there are the young girls. So they haven't had it not beaten. No, that's the wrong word. They haven't had it suppressed out of them.
Right. Emotionally beaten out of them. That's
emotionally,
right.
Yeah. There we go.
Some...
Sorry, Kathleen. I jumped in as I always do. So
that's all right. So I'm curious, Rachel, what transformations have you witnessed in your clients through this type of therapy?
It's really hard for me to talk about this without crying. That's okay. I have seen on the therapy sofa over the years, clients, more women than men, I will say, allowing us to what I call go beyond content. Content is, I hate my boyfriend or I hate my boss, or I'm so frustrated about, I'm doing my hand motion, content's real. And I say, give me a minute. Let's come together. Let's just hang out first, especially now on Zoom. I'm in person a few days a week, but still most people see me on Zoom. And I look you in the eyes and we hang out together and there's a contact happening. And then, of course, if I want to do a little bit of movement with them, I'll do very safe, small amount of movement. Also internal movement around breath and physical connection. I immediately see dropping into presence, dropping into the now. I immediately see softening of the eyes and some tears. Not a breakdown where like, oh my God, how am I going to leave this psychotherapy session? This old lady's got me broken down, and how will I get to work? Just enough that we come into contact with self and with what's here. I also have seen people, of course, heal from trauma, sexual abuse, a lot of emotional abuse over the course of time. In my dance therapy program, where we're in a room together, perhaps, or a one-on-one dance therapy session, where do I begin? I've seen a lot happen. I'd like it to be more longitudinal. I don't think it's a really good thing for me to say, oh boy, folks, I see this great, outpour of emotion, and then I say goodbye and I only see them once. I'm very grateful when I get students to come back again and again, and I see the trajectory of their health. But as an example, I've worked with young men who've come in and taken me aside and said, I don't share this with a lot of people, but I have autism and I'm really struggling a lot to make friends here at this place where you're teaching. And after a month, they come and say, Rachel, I have my first girlfriend. Your class has really helped me. Because there they can be in, of course, their own beat and so on.
Right.
I think your question is great, but in no way, listener, do I ever pretend that this is for everyone. Wouldn't that be naive? This is not for everyone. And that's great. Let there be something for everyone. What is for everyone, though, Kathleen and Peter, is, I'm nervous before a public speaking experience. Okay, I met that goofy gal, Rachel. I'm in the bathroom by myself, and, I've put my hand on my heart and I've made contact with myself, and I can feel my heartbeat, and I'm slowing down and I'm softening my shoulders and I'm softening my face, and I'm coming back to presence. And now I'm lifting my chest out a bit and feeling empowered. Maybe even I'm squeezing everything. And listener, I'm like squeezing my fists, like I'm just tight until I actually shake, like I've eaten a lemon, my face is squeezed, and then I release, right? Maybe a person says, you know what, Rachel, that dancing is a lot for me, but some of those movement forms you've shown me, the shapes and so on, I like to do them before work. I'm much clearer at my meetings. I'm much less stressed when I talk to my mom, etc.
Wow. Very good. So here, I'm going to make an observation, and I'm more than happy if you tell me I'm totally wrong, but I'm going to make it anyway, because that's what I do. And my observation from my perspective of my age of 73, I must qualify that by saying I grew up in a different environment to what we experience in North America and Europe, completely different in so many ways, and perhaps elitist in some ways. However, my observation is that many more people are suffering from anger, fear, and depression now, seriously, than I observed when I was growing up 40, 50 years ago. Am I on the right track? And if so, why?
I hate that you're right. First of all, you're correct. I hate that you're right, meaning I'm really
Sure.
sad. I'm really sad. Peter, I think it would be naive for me to say, 100% and everything was great when you were a boy. I think that I know in my generation as a Gen Xer, and you're a baby boomer, I believe.
Yeah.
I think in your generation, more than mine, the symbol was, when I was a child, we had stickers with smiley faces. That was a very big symbology, was turn your frown upside down, just smile. You've got 2 arms and 2 legs. You're not a kid starving in Ethiopia. Keep trucking. I can only imagine in your environment in one of the countries in South Africa that I can't recall the name of, but you've been in other parts of the world where there was, different cultural norms. Perhaps,
Totally.
Perhaps much more solid, masculine. We might even call them slightly toxic. And there were also lovely things too. I don't want to take it one way. I like to blame social media for some of this. I think it's, again, naive to say all of it. I think it's a combination of social media showing us all the ways we've failed. I say that in quotes. I think it is, a good chunk of it is that. I think that in the last 3 or 4 years, we've seen such an uptick for obvious reasons, which is this flippin' pandemic has really, really hurt young people.
Oh, yeah.
Deeply. So I wish my answer was more comprehensive. And if we ever have a chat and we sit down and have pastry over Zoom, we'll really get into talking about where you're from. I'd love to know more, because I feel quite ignorant. People are like, yeah, it was one of those countries in Africa. But I say to you, I think it's a combination of social media, the times we're living in, where young people are, because of the pandemic and for many other reasons that are not pandemic related, very insular and very insulated. I also think, on a sweet note, what a gift that we can get therapy via Zoom and for less money, and that it's normalized in the kids on social media. It can be cool kids and do therapy. If I did a social media study, and we already know this, we feel more depressed when we look at social media. I feel older and uglier when I look at social media than I could possibly feel looking in the mirror and just being in my life. We could go on and on and on about it. Those are my sort of basic answers. I'd love to have better ones in the future, but social media, pandemic, insularity in the young person's culture. Also, we talk about aging in the most god-awful way for your generation and mine, which is, we want the end of it. We want to consider aging a disease almost. So whether you're old or young, you get to suffer through social media and the fact that we all are aging.
Right.
Right. Sorry, Kathleen, back to you.
Yes, so we are running a bit short on time here, but we have still a few more questions that we want to ask you. We want to give you an opportunity to tell us about your workshops. And as you mentioned, you do work virtually as well. So.
Yes, absolutely. To pop in there now, or questions now?
No, you just tell us about your workshops.
Oh, of course. Oh, forgive me. Of course, that was the question. My goodness. I always feel a little bit like I'm just doing shameless promotion. I teach workshops. I teach workshops in person, and I do a lot of psychotherapy and individual movement sessions on Zoom. And sometimes I do volunteering at the public library, and also at suicide prevention seminars and things. So also, please, listener, know you can do this in lots of other ways, not just me. If a listener is like, I really want to do this, I don't live near Rachel, I'm in Toronto, and I want to do this in person. If I was a listener and I was near you, I'd probably want to do it in person. She or he would look up words like conscious dance, ecstatic dance, expressive art therapy, movement therapy, and she or he might go down that's a fun rabbit hole where you're like, oh, there's poetry therapy. That's a safe start. Oh, okay, there's drum therapy. Why not? So that's one avenue. But yes, I teach at retreat centers, like beautiful places. Canyon Ranch is one of them. A learning center I've been teaching at for many years called the Omega Institute, which is in upstate New York. So a nice car ride.
Ranch in Arizona?
We have a Canyon Ranch in Arizona.
Oh, yeah.
I've not been to that yet. We have Canyon Ranch in Lenox, Massachusetts,
okay,
some hours south of you. And we have one right here in Northern California in Woodside, which is a beautiful retreat in the redwoods. Great for birding and relaxing and slowing down. And So I do that teaching. And then on Zoom, people really get that delicious private experience with me. Do a lot of psychotherapy on Zoom. And I do a bit of grief work on Zoom too. The classes on Zoom, I'm holding off on right now because in person is fueling me so much. But here and there, I offer free classes on Zoom for people. I just need to get what's the word for like a good number of people to make it worthwhile energetically.
Right.
And then I'm loving my Zoom classes. I'm also a music snob or geek. And so when I do it on Zoom, I know that your computer might not, have the greatest sound system. And I feel sad that people are missing out sometimes on how juicy the music or my voice might be in the dance.
Oh. Wow, very good.
Well, Peter, I know you have a burning question, so why don't you go right into your burning question?
I will jump straight into my burning question for Rachel. So, Rachel, with all your experience and all your years of counseling people and working as a psychotherapist and dance and the whole deal, you've seen a lot of people. Would you say there's one characteristic, mindset, or habit that differentiates those who remain well balanced through life from those who don't, or is it a lot more complicated than that?
Oh, God. It is so complicated, but I'll give you two or three
yeah,
that
that's
are really
fine.
big, and I'll try to be quick. One of them, my dear friends, is I do think we come out of the womb formed in some ways, meaning our disposition has, we don't all get dealt the same deck of cards. I know that because we all have relatives who suffer mental illness. I know that because, and I also think we know if somebody, God forbid, loses a limb, a few years later, they're back at the baseline of how happy they were before. And if somebody wins the lottery, they can be just as depressed as before, depending on who they are. So some of it is sort of how we view the world.
Right.
And friends, I find that one really hard because I was not born viewing the world as all sunshine and roses. I was really a down kid, tremendously introverted, scared, and sometimes anxious and depressed. So another big part of it is intention. Another big part of balanced life is, okay, today isn't easy. I'm putting my shoes on, or I'm making it easy by sleeping with my clothes on for my walk. Or I'm having that dear friend text me and say, come on, kiddo, you can do it. So it's intention. A lot of it is sort of how we're made. But the one factor I really want to say more than anything right now is two factors is presence and compassion.
Okay.
We've got to shut everything down. Not this, though. This is different than like when I'm just zoned out. Like I'm with humans now. And when the listener listens, they'll know when I said this, I was present, which then in turn, when you listen to a good podcast, you feel the presence of the speakers.
Sure.
So our presence helps our health, our being in the moment and not being elsewhere. Next rock concert you go to, maybe don't have your camera out the whole time. Maybe just watch Beyonce if you want to.
Right.
The next time your child has a piano recital, well, what can I say? Parents, take your photos. It's fine. Take your videos. Be present. And compassion is a muscle that we're not all born with. Not to say people are sociopaths, but if we can build our compassion and care about one another, we then build kindness. We also build gratitude. That whole mixture creates so much remarkable goodness. Doing an act of kindness, that's my greatest high. That is my greatest high, and probably yours too. Yeah. So those factors help a lot. I could talk about how we're a work addicted culture, but I love my work, so that doesn't help. And I don't think work is the problem. I think it's other stories and narratives that we have about ourselves that's the problem.
Okay.
Am I right in thinking that and I've been guilty of this myself, that for many people, one of the ways of coping with the pressures of life is to overwork because it's an escape?
Absolutely, 300%. And it's probably why one of the reasons we have great thinkers. They had to get out of the house. They had 6 kids screaming. They felt that their partner nagged them, but maybe their partner didn't. Absolutely. And it's not the worst addiction or escape in the world.
Sure.
Right.
It's not.
Sure.
Right.
No. Wow. Thank you for that. Very good.
So, Rachel, how do people contact you?
Sure. Well, I wish you could just scream bliss into the air and I would answer it and we'd have a magical moment. But you've got to get on that gorgeous machine. I'm at rachelfleischman.com. The spelling is tricky, but it's findable. I'm findable. And then I have Bliss Counseling, and I have a cheeky little joke, which is you're in Canada, and guess what? you spell counseling different than I.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You spell it with 2 L's and I spell it with 1.
Right.
So you can try it with 2 L's and you'll probably get someone in the UK or someone else who does Bliss Counseling. But yes, it's Bliss Counseling or rachelfleischman.com. I try to be on LinkedIn once or twice a week. I try to stay off the news because it's devastating.
Yes.
But what I love doing more than anything is having a listener write, I want resources. Not I need a session with you. I want resources because I took an oath as a social worker. When you need resources, and resources means could be names of therapists, it could be dance programs that I've vetted for them, it could be learning about a retreat that they take, it could be whatever. I love helping people with that as well.
Wonderful.
Okay, great.
Thank
And
you
for
so much.
for our audio listeners, all those details will be in the description on whichever platform you are listening to this on. That's
Okay.
it from me. Back to you, Kathleen.
Well, thank you so much, Rachel. It was an absolute pleasure having you on the show today. I mean, we could have gone on for hours, I think,
Oh, for
in
sure.
this discussion, but you will have you back at some point in the future. I hope you will come back. And if anyone out there is interested in being a guest on our show, we invite you to join us or to visit us rather at theyakkingshow.com. All you need to do is click on the contacts tab where you will find a short application form, and we'd love to hear from you. But first, Peter, would you like to talk about the newsletter?
Absolutely. You've just experienced another wonderful guest, a really exciting guest on the show. So to make sure you don't miss out the news of our guests that are coming on in the future, sign up for our newsletter. We only send you 1 email a week. And we'll tell you who's on this week and who's coming next week, a couple of health tips, maybe a business tip, and you'll be in the picture. So hop onto the website, as Kathleen said, theyakingshow.com. You'll find forms in many places and join our community. That's it from me. Goodbye, everybody.
Until next time, take care, everyone. Bye-bye.